Family of Simone Jasmine, better known as the Queen of the South, has rubbished claims that she was involved or attempted. Jasmine's believed to have led a ruthless gang in Wentworth, Durban, which supplied townships around the city. She was later arrested today after being last Thursday by a group of men.
On the D-Day, Durban streets carried their usual movement. People went about their lives not realizing the balance of power was about to change. Confident, untouchable, Simone was in her normal flow and felt she still had control. She never saw them approaching, just a short flash of movement. Boom! The sound of fire ripped through the sky. Just like that, her name was etched on the Black Book of History. Simone Jasmine ruled Durban's criminal underworld with an iron fist and built a empire that made her one of the most powerful people in South Africa's criminal scene. She had an effect on a lot more than just the streets. It reached all the way to the most corrupt parts of the city. Absolute power, on the other hand, leads to rival gangs betraying allies and the police closing in. She stopped threats, led millions of people, and beat deadly forces. Still, if people don't trust each other, even the smallest mistake could someone. And for Simone, the cracks were already very clear. She created her empire from the ground up. She inherited no criminal dynasty and was not born into power. She battled for every inch of control, mercilessly carving out her position in Durban's underworld. Her ascent was not a mistake. She was climbing deliberately, transforming from a little-known hustler into the most dreaded woman in the city. Her story started in the streets, where survival meant knowing how to play the game. She was sharp, quick, and always one step ahead. While others scrambled for scraps, she saw the bigger picture. She understood that weren't just about selling, they were about control. She learned fast, aligning herself with the right people, paying off the right officials, and eliminating anyone who stood in her way. The streets whispered her name long before the media ever did. Her power came from more than just drugs. It came from fear. People didn't cross Simone Jasmine unless they were ready to face the consequences. Her enforcers made sure of that. Bribery, blackmail, and bullets kept her empire intact. Even rival gangs thought twice before challenging her. She had connections everywhere. Police officers, politicians, even members of the judiciary. That's what made her different. While other criminals fought in the streets, she played the game where it really mattered, behind closed doors, where deals were made and enemies disappeared without a trace. Durban wasn't ready for someone like her. In a world dominated by men, she rewrote the rules. She didn't just survive, she thrived. And with every new deal, every new shipment, her empire grew. Millions flowed through her hands, all washed clean through businesses that looked legitimate on paper. Real estate, nightclubs, car dealerships, fronts for an operation so massive, even law enforcement struggled to map it out. They knew she was running things, they just couldn't touch her. But power like that doesn't come without enemies. Simone knew it. She had built her empire by stepping over people, and some of them weren't willing to stay down. Rival syndicates watched her rise with envy, waiting for a moment of weakness. And in the criminal world, trust was the rarest currency. Even those closest to her had a price. Her empire wasn't just about smuggling, it was a machine. Cocaine, heroin, crystal meth. Every major shipment that passed through KwaZulu-Natal had her fingerprints on it. She had distribution networks stretching from street-level dealers to international suppliers. Some of the moved through the ports, hidden in shipments no one dared to inspect. Others were smuggled overland, protected by officials who owed her favors. But it wasn't just about moving product. It was about making sure the money never stopped flowing. She had a system, one that turned dirty money into clean assets. She owned businesses, laundromats, luxury apartments, even high-end boutiques. Everything was a front. Everything had a purpose. She didn't just deal. She ran an entire economy, one that made her millions while keeping her identity in the shadows. For years, her name struck fear into the hearts of those who even considered crossing her. There were rumors, stories of what happened to people who betrayed her. Some vanished overnight, their bodies never found. Others were made examples of, down in broad daylight as a warning. Simone didn't need to pull the trigger herself. She had people for that, people who were willing to do whatever it took to keep her in power. But not all enemies come from the outside. Inside her organization, cracks were beginning to show. Some of her lieutenants wanted more power, more money, and in the world of crime, loyalty only lasts as long as it benefits someone. Whispers of discontent turned into secret meetings, and secret meetings turned into betrayal. At the same time, law enforcement was starting to put the pieces together. Simone had spent years buying protection, But even corrupt officials knew that aligning with her was becoming dangerous. Some of them started turning on her, feeding information to those who wanted her empire to crumble. Then there were the rival syndicates. They had watched her dominate for years, watched as she expanded her reach beyond Durban, beyond South Africa. They had waited, knowing that power like hers couldn't last forever. And when the first signs of weakness appeared, they were ready to strike. Simone could feel the shift. A missing shipment here, an informant leaking information there, police raids on her businesses that never would have happened before. The people who once feared her were now questioning her power, and in the underworld, perception was everything. If people stopped believing she was untouchable, then she wasn't. For the first time, she wasn't the one in control. The walls were closing in. The game she had mastered was starting to turn against her. And in Durban's underworld, there was only one rule. When a king or queen falls, they never get back up. There was nothing that Simone Jasmine could have done to prepare for what that day brought. It was done in broad daylight, and with such precision that no one had a chance of surviving. It was quick, accurate, and brutal. The killer attacked her while she was in her car in a place she knew. A black car pulled up next to her, but the windows were so dark that no one could see what was inside. Then were fired. A flood of bullets broke the windows and tore through metal and flesh. It was over in an instant, not having any doubts. There was no way to get away. It wasn't a random attack or a theft, it was an execution. The people nearby were too stunned to react. By the time anyone processed what had happened, the were gone. No screeching tires, no reckless escape, just a smooth, practiced departure, as if they had done this before. And maybe they had, because this wasn't just any hit. It was a message. Someone wanted Simone Jasmine out of the picture, and they wanted the whole city to know. Speculation exploded instantly. Who ordered the hit? There was no shortage of suspects. Rival drug lords had long envied her power. She had crushed competition, stolen territory, and outmaneuvered some of the most dangerous figures in the underworld. Did one of them finally get tired of waiting for her downfall and decide to take matters into their own hands? Or was it an inside job? Power breeds betrayal, and her organization was filled with ambitious players who wanted a bigger slice of the empire. Then there was law enforcement. She had paid off plenty of officers, but that only worked as long as she was useful. Had she become a liability? Did someone in the system decide it was safer to eliminate her than to risk exposure? And what about the foreign cartels? She had expanded beyond Durban, stepping into territories that weren't hers. Did she make the wrong move? Did she threaten the profits of someone much bigger and more powerful than even she realized? There weren't many clues. The police answer was very quiet, like they didn't want to go into much more detail. The day in question, the surveillance cameras that should have caught everything had technical problems. The few witnesses who spoke out quickly either disappeared or changed what they said. The killers had disappeared without a trace, so it looked like no one was in a hurry to find them. When Simone left, chaos broke out in the city's underground. She was feared, respected, and in charge of everything. She was the glue that held everything together. There was a loss of balance of power without her. Everyone wanted a piece of what she left behind. Her top lieutenants rushed to take charge, but none of them had the same presence as she did. Rival gangs moved quickly, took over land, made deals, and killed anyone who got in their way when they saw weakness. As more bodies fell, the violence got worse. The real violence, though, happened behind the scenes. The people who were closest to Simone weren't just trying to get power, they were looking for answers. Someone in her circle had lied to her, so she didn't trust many people. Suspicion turned into paranoia, and that led to more. If someone had worked with the hitmen without being seen, they would not be able to enjoy their reward. The response was cruel, quick, and left no room for doubt. When police arrived, the streets were on fire. Attacks on a number of sites linked to Simone's empire. Anywhere and everything was suddenly being watched by the police, even some of her front companies and hideouts. It looked like they were simply waiting for her to trip and fall so that they could move. Had they said anything about the arrangement? Or were they just taking advantage of the chaos? Either way, the people she left behind were running out of time, and her kingdom, which used to be strong, was falling apart. The public watched in shock as the story went on. The news talked about her rise, her rule, and her sudden and violent from every angle. There are a lot of theories out there. Was this a hit that the government cleared? Want to get revenge? Someone warned those who dared to fly too high? Some people thought she got what she deserved, while others said she knew too much and was shut up before she could speak. The families of her victims spoke out to remember the people she. Others are sad about the of someone they looked up to as a guardian, especially those who had benefited from her power. She built an empire, but in the process, she made more enemies than she could handle. And finally, one of them had won. The official inquiry yielded nowhere, evidence was few, and the statements were evasive. The police had some ideas, but they didn't have a strong candidate. But things looked different on the streets. People quickly talked about who was involved, but no one was brave enough to say it out loud. Fear makes people quiet. There was no one who wanted to be the next focus. Simone Jasmine's empire didn't just vanish the day she was taken out. The streets buzzed with rumors, but the real players knew better. Her was a move on a much bigger chessboard. The question wasn't just who her, but why. Some whispers pointed to a covert government operation, a silent takedown meant to eliminate a growing threat. She had become too powerful, too connected. Politicians, law enforcement, even international figures had stakes in the trade she controlled. If she started talking, careers would crumble. Did someone in power decide she was no longer worth the risk? Her downfall was too precise to be a random hit. No mistakes, no second chances. This was an execution with a purpose. But her money? That was a different story. Millions had moved through her hands, laundered into businesses, offshore accounts, and properties under different names. The moment she was gone, control of that wealth became the next battle. Some believed a trusted ally had taken over, ensuring her fortune remained within her network. Others suspected that those who once protected her had swooped in, wiping out every trace of her financial power. If she had kept records, names, transactions, the secrets of the underworld, who had them now? Authorities stayed quiet, offering vague statements and closing the case as quickly as it had opened. The missing CCTV footage, the silence from those who should have spoken up, everything pointed to a cover-up. If Simone had left behind anything that could expose the real players, it was clear someone was working hard to keep it buried. But in the world she ruled, secrets never stay hidden forever. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.